President Donald Trump moved at a blistering pace in his first month back in the White House. He lied fast and furious, too. In speeches, interviews, exchanges with reporters and posts on social media, the president filled his public statements not only with exaggerations but outright fabrications. As he did during his first presidency, Trump made false claims with a frequency and variety unmatched by any other elected official in Washington. Here is our list of Trump's 13 biggest lies since he was inaugurated on January 20th. It was hard to choose. The tale of the $50 million, no, make it $100 million, in condoms for Hamas. When Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt announced at her first official White House briefing that Trump had thwarted a plan to spend $50 million to fund condoms in Gaza, it was immediately clear the claim was highly dubious. The Trump administration had no evidence to substantiate it. But Trump not only repeated the $50 million figure the next day, he added an incendiary claim that the condoms were for Hamas. Then, days after it had become obvious the $50 million figure was pure fiction, he inflated it to $100 million. This was another example of Trumpflation, the president's years-old habit of making his inaccurate stories more and more inaccurate over time. Blaming Ukraine for starting the war on Ukraine. Russia started the war in Ukraine when it invaded Ukraine in 2022. That is an obvious fact. But on Tuesday, when Trump dismissed Ukrainians' complaints about their exclusion from U.S.-Russia negotiations about ending the war, he falsely accused Ukraine of starting the war, saying, "You should have never started it. You could have made a deal." Laughable Kremlin-style propaganda, this time from the President of the United States. Many academics and observers who study the American political scene have called Trump unique or highly unusual in his lying and its effect on political discourse. It has long been a truism that politicians lie, wrote Carol McGranahan for the American Ethnologist in 2017, but Donald Trump is different. He is the most accomplished and effective liar to have ever participated in American politics. Moreover, his lying has reshaped public discourse so that the frequency, degree, and impact of lying in politics are now unprecedented. Historian Douglas Brinkley stated that U.S. presidents have occasionally lied or misled the country, but none were a serial liar like Trump. Donald Stern, writing in Psychoanalytic Dialogues in 2019, declared, "We expect politicians to stretch the truth. But Trump is a whole different animal, because Trump lies as a policy, and will say anything to satisfy his supporters or himself." Heidi Taxdal-Skjeseth, writing for the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism in 2017, described how lies have always been an integral part of politics. However, Trump was delivering untruths on an unprecedented scale during his campaign and presidency. Skjeseth commented that no one in French politics was comparable to Trump in his provision of falsehoods. Trump is conscious of the value of repetition to get his lies believed. He demonstrated this knowledge when he instructed Stephanie Grisham, his White House press secretary, to use his method of lying. As long as you keep repeating something, it doesn't matter what you say. Trump effectively uses the big lie technique's method of repetition to exploit the illusory truth effect, a tendency to believe false information to be correct after repeated exposure. Research has studied Trump's use of the effect. New research published in Public Opinion Quarterly reveals a correlation between the number of times President Donald Trump repeated falsehoods during his presidency and misperceptions among Republicans, and that the repetition effect was stronger on the beliefs of people who consume information primarily from right-leaning news outlets. Trump, once a prominent promoter of lies about President Barack Obama's birthplace, continued to demonstrate no hesitation lying about not only policy issues but also individual people. This time, to promote his push to try to get transgender athletes banned from the Olympics, he told his familiar story about how 2 gold medalists in women's boxing at the Games in Paris last year were men who transitioned. Wrong. As the International Olympic Committee repeatedly noted during the Olympics, when Trump and others made such claims, neither champion had transitioned. Both were born as female and have always competed in women's events. Even the discredited boxing authority that controversially disqualified the women from a 2023 competition, vaguely claiming a test had found they had unfair competitive advantages, did not allege they had transitioned. Before taking office, Trump casually asserted that the Canadian people like his idea of Canada becoming the 51st U.S. state. That was the opposite of the truth. The idea is hugely unpopular with the Canadian public. Then, after his inauguration, Trump continued to make stuff up about Canada, at one point posting on social media and then saying out loud that Canada prohibits U.S. banks from doing business there. He added, "Can you believe that? No doubt some Americans believe it, but it's false." After the deadly January collision between a military helicopter and a passenger jet, Trump blamed Biden administration diversity initiatives at the Federal Aviation Administration without providing any evidence any FAA diversity policy had anything to do with the crash. He added in a fictional story about a frantic last-minute Biden push to hire people with significant disabilities as air traffic controllers, failing to explain that this FAA pilot program was actually a years-old initiative launched during his own administration in 2019. When Trump talked about the tariffs he imposed on Chinese imports in his first presidency, he spoke of how much money from China these tariffs generated for the U.S. Treasury. When he talked about the additional tariffs he plans to impose on various other countries during his current presidency, he spoke of a need to charge them. At no point did he acknowledge that U.S. importers, not foreign countries, are the ones who pay the actual tariff charges, or that study after study, including one from the federal government's Bipartisan Trade Commission, found that Americans ended up bearing almost the entire cost of his first-term tariffs on Chinese products. Trump keeps flirting with, though not explicitly endorsing, the thoroughly debunked conspiracy theory that childhood vaccines cause autism, and in a social media post in early February, he inflated the extent of the increase in the known prevalence of autism over the last 2 decades. 20 years ago, autism in children was 1 in 10,000. Now it's 1 in 34. Trump wrote, "Wow. Something's really wrong." Trump claimed to have obliterated Iran's nuclear program after an attack, but intelligence reports indicated minimal damage. He big lie strategy. His repeated claims of election fraud after the 2020 election are compared to propaganda tactics where a falsehood is repeated until it's accepted as truth. Relationship with truth. Experts in the documentary argue that Trump often used confusion and repetition to manipulate public perception and exhaust media scrutiny. During and between his terms as President of the United States, Donald Trump has made tens of thousands of false or misleading claims. Fact-checkers at The Washington Post documented 30,573 false or misleading claims during his first presidential term, an average of 21 per day. Many news organizations initially resisted describing Trump's falsehoods as lies, but began to do so by June 2019. The Washington Post said his frequent repetition of claims he knew to be false amounted to a campaign based on disinformation. Steve Bannon, Trump's 2016 presidential campaign CEO and chief strategist during the first 7 months of Trump's first presidency, said that the press, rather than Democrats, was Trump's primary adversary and the way to deal with them is to flood the zone with shit. In February 2025, a public relations CEO stated that the flood the zone tactic, also known as the fire hose of falsehood, was designed to make sure no single action or event stands out above the rest by having them occur at a rapid pace, thus preventing the public from keeping up and preventing controversy or outrage over a specific action or event. As part of their attempts to overturn the 2020 U.S. presidential election, Trump and his allies repeatedly falsely claimed there had been massive election fraud and that Trump had won the election. Their effort was characterized by some as an implementation of Hitler's big lie propaganda technique. In June 2023, a criminal grand jury indicted Trump on one count of making false statements and representations, specifically by hiding subpoenaed classified documents from his own attorney who was trying to find and return them to the government. In August 2023, 21 of Trump's falsehoods about the 2020 election were listed in his Washington, D.C. criminal indictment, and 27 were listed in his Georgia criminal indictment. It has been suggested that Trump's false statements amount to bullshit rather than lies. Thanks for watching, stay curious, stay informed, and we'll see you in the next video.